be here today, but we have the competent Ms. Terry Smith with us filling in, so we should be in good hands. And good afternoon. It's Monday, February 7th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee. I'm the chair, Robert Lilligren. Before we call it to order, just a couple things. COVID is continuing to cause us to alter our usual procedures, and the Metropolitan Council Chair has determined it's not practical nor prudent to conduct in-person meetings in response to the pandemic. So we'll participate in this meeting by electronic means, and this Community Development Committee meeting will be conducted under Minnesota Statute, Section 13D.021. This meeting will be conducted by WebEx. It's recorded. Members of the public will be able to monitor this meeting by going to the website online to view the live stream. The video is embedded at the website with the agenda. Because it's virtual, we'll do the roll call for each business item, and please only use the chat function to address technical difficulties. We'll want to communicate verbally through speaking so that people monitoring this meeting can follow along. So if there's no questions there, I will call this meeting to order by asking Michelle to take attendance by roll call to ensure we have a quorum. Michelle, please.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. I received advance notice that council members Lee and Mousse will not be attending today. So I'll start with Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here, and I'm going to need to step away for a few minutes.
Okay. Vento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. We have a quorum and can continue on. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda that's posted at the Met Council website. Members, if there are no objections or changes, we can move on to our business without a roll call. Any changes to the agenda? Great. Hearing none, we'll move on the agenda. The next item is the minutes from the January 18th regular Community Development Committee meeting. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember. Move to approval. Is there a second?
Wolf seconds.
Appreciate it, Councilmember. Any discussion, additions, corrections? And hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion to approve the minutes.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That carries and the minutes are approved. And next on our agenda is the consent agenda. There are 4 items for our consideration that staff have determined are non-controversial and are consistent with council policy. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Johnson moves.
Thank you.
Wolf seconds.
Thank you, council members. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. The consent agenda is approved, and we will move on to our business items for today. The first business item on our agenda is 2022-40, the 2021 Local Housing and Incentives Account funding recommendations. And I believe Ms. Johnson is here. Ashley, are you here to present, please?
Yes, Chair. I'm here. I'm ready.
Well, was there a presentation on this, Ms. Johnson, or did you just want to move into action?
There is a presentation. I think Greg is.
Oh, I see it. Yep. Thank you. Please, Ms. Johnson, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. All right, so let's hop in. So I am Ashley Johnson. I am the manager of the Local Housing Incentives Account, or LHAA, in the Livable Communities Act team. And today I will be presenting our 2021 funding recommendations. So we have applicants on the call, which are local at local city staff or development authority staff and project developers, which can chime in if there are any in-depth project questions that may be better suited for them to answer. So next slide, please, Greg. So in today's presentation, it has 3 parts. First, I will give a brief overview of the application and evaluation process for LHIA. Then I will share the funding recommendations for this year. And lastly, we will talk about some project summaries. We have some great projects this year that we are really excited about. So next slide, please. So let's step into the overview of the application and evaluation process. So this graphic represents the 3 buckets or categories of applications that we consider. First, and on the left, as always, since the start of LHIA, we consider applications to Minnesota Housing's Consolidated Request for Proposals, or Consolidated RFP. And we consider applications in this category that are requesting both state funding resources, such as LIHTC or low-income housing tax credits, or housing infrastructure bonds and LHIA. And then moving to the middle bucket, by working with our partners at Minnesota Housing for 2021, we were able to allow applications to the Super RFP or the Consolidated RFP for projects that were only requesting LHIA funds. This allowed us to consider projects that have been awarded previously by Minnesota Housing in prior years, but had an additional gap to fill with rising costs, for example, or projects that were being primarily subsidized with resources outside of Minnesota Housing, but had an additional gap to fill. And then finally, on the right, since 2018, we have considered projects receiving LIHTC or low-income housing tax credit funding from sub-allocators. So that's not from Minnesota Housing, but from entities that or counties that are allocators of tax credits as well. So next slide, please. So our evaluation process begins by ranking projects based on council adopted LHIA priorities. So these priorities are projects that provide rental housing at or below 30% of AMI, proposals that serve large families by providing 2 or more 3-bedroom units, and proposals serving people experiencing long-term homelessness. So LHIA provides gap funding for these projects for hard costs. We also consider how well the proposal meets the applicant city's need for affordable housing over the 2021 to 2030 decade. So after we rank all of the LHIA eligible projects, this is the second bullet, using this criteria, we eliminate projects that are already being fully funded by Minnesota Housing or that are requesting LHIA and Minnesota Housing funding, but are not being funded by the state. And this is because in many cases, the lack of state funding can leave a significant project gap. And of course, we want to fund projects that are most ready to go. And we also often have applicants that return the next year if they, end up having a gap and end up not being chosen. So, however, you can see the unless and the little bullets at the bottom. However, if the project has ranked high for LHIA priorities, the remaining gap is not insurmountably high, the development team can demonstrate, and if the development team can demonstrate that our funds, LHIA funds, will provide leverage for alternate sources to fill the gap, we keep that project in play and we still consider it. And as always, the process includes ongoing conversations with our partners, Minnesota Housing, the sub-allocators. It's a back and forth kind of conversation about when projects will be ready, if the funding that we are offering will actually fill the gap in the timeline for development. So it's kind of a back and forth iterative process. So next slide, please. So this is our 2021 LHIA cycle calendar. This has been our timeline so far, beginning with the notice of funding availability that was released in March of last year. With state legislature changes, the application due date and subsequently all that followed was pushed back about a month or so. We typically bring our funding recommendations before the committee in December or in January. But here we are in February. Next slide, please. So here are our funding recommendations. Kicking off funding recommendations. We'll first begin by showing the funding awards recently made by Minnesota Housing in the 2020 consolidated RFP process. So these are their multifamily projects that they chose to fund in the Metro this year. And as you can see, Mary Hall and Roger Main Street Senior Housing are italicized in this table because they're also being recommended for funding for LHAA. So we'll look at a table of all of our funded projects in a few slides, but we wanted to be sure to talk about those that Minnesota Housing recommended and those projects that we got the opportunity to fund with Minnesota Housing, those italicized projects. Okay, next slide, please. So these are the single family awards that Minnesota Housing recommended for funding. And we separated this into two slides so that we could hopefully get a table large enough for everyone to be able to read. So this table is showing the single family projects that were funded through the consolidated RFP. And this particular slide shows those in Minneapolis and in St. Paul. And one of these projects also requested LHA funding, but did not rank high enough to be recommended for funding. Next slide, please. Gotcha. Oh, and this is the follow-up to that slide. Those cities that are in the suburban or in the 7-county metro. And this includes suburban and scattered site locations. And as you can see, Two Rivers Community Land Trust and Homes Within Reach are included in this table because those projects are recommended to receive funding from both Minnesota Housing and from LHAA. So next slide, please. So we've talked about Minnesota Housing's projects, the suburban single family projects, the Metro single family projects, and their multifamily projects. Now we'll move on to how our LHA recommendations breaks down this year. So this slide is to remind you of the funding available for 2021. 2021 was another unprecedented year in terms of LHA funding. In 2019, we had 5.5 million, and previously in 2019, we had 2.5 million. So this year, we are proposing 6 multifamily awards and 4 single-family ownership projects for this that makes up this $8 million value. And we have a breakdown of the specific projects and the dollar amounts that we're recommending funding for the $8 million on the next slide. So next slide, please. So this is an overview of our LHA funding recommendations for this year. So the project names, as you can see, are on the left. The city or the applicant is listed in the middle with the units, the new units and the preserve units. So projects that are proposing new construction and projects that are rehab projects or preservation projects in general. And then on the right is our funding recommendation amounts for those projects. So that's 6 multifamily rental projects at the top and 4 single family ownership projects at the bottom. And the multifamily rental projects are in Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, Rogers, and Edina, as you can see. And the single family ownership projects, we have 3 scatter site projects in Washington and Dakota County and suburban Hennepin County. And then 1 project that is in St. Louis Park. So again, the projects that are recommended by Minnesota Housing and LHA funding are italicized. So you can see those that we're both putting money into, and then those that LHA is funding specifically for this year. And over the next few slides, we'll look at these projects one by one so you can get a real feel for them. Next slide, please. So the first project that we'll talk about, but maybe I should pause here to see if any if any council members have any questions so far about the funding recommendations or what I've went over.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Committee members, any questions on what we've seen so far? Any questions? Councilmember Chambers, did you have a question or you just popping? Okay, cool. All right, Ms. Johnson, hearing no questions, please continue.
Nice. Okay, so before I hop into these though, keep in mind LHA's priorities. So rental housing for people with incomes at or below 30% of AMI, proposals serving large families by providing three or more bedroom units, and proposals serving people experiencing long-term homelessness, and that we actually consider contextually the need gap in these cities that ask for LHAA. So it's not only in terms of affordability at or below 30, but we actually think about what a particular city contextually might need. So the first project is Minneapolis Public Housing Authority Family Housing Expansion, or shortened to MPHA, Family Housing Expansion. And this project is in the city of Minneapolis. It is a really cool project. It's new construction, 4 to 6 unit buildings over 16 sites across the city. And it includes 84 units. This is an all affordable project, and all of the units will be affordable at or below 30% of area median income. It will serve high priority homeless individuals, and it includes Minneapolis Public Housing Authority vouchers. And the units provided will be 2 to 3 bedroom units. So this was kind of a cool mix of multifamily development where, you know, it's stretched across sites. It's not necessarily on one particular site. So I really enjoyed reading and learning about this project. We're recommending an award of $1.4 million for MPHA family housing expansion. Next slide, please. So our next project that we're recommending funding for is Mary Hall in St. Paul. And this is a preservation project. So it's not new construction, and it's to provide supportive housing units to those that will reside here. 88 units total, affordable at or below 30% of AMI. And this project will serve people exiting Ramsey County's coordinated entry system and provide permanent supportive housing to those individuals exiting that system and to other individuals listed in the proposal. So this project is to include 24/7 on-site services and has efficiency and 1 bedrooms for those that live there. This is in St. Paul, and we're recommending an award of a little under $1.2 million. Next slide, please. So our third project that we're proposing is in St. Louis Park, Rise on 7, and the recommended award is $950,000 for this project. So this is a new construction, 120 units, all affordable at 30 to 70% AMI. So they really got a range of AMI in this particular project. We'll serve high priority homeless individuals, and this project includes an early childhood center and a commercial space within the development, and this is 1 to 3 bedrooms. And I'll note that Rise on 7 was also chosen to be funded by LCDA. So this is a project that the Met Council has chosen to support multiple times. So it was really nice to learn about it. Next slide, please. So this is Curie Commons in Minneapolis, a very large project, new construction, 187 units, all affordable. And it's affordable at or below 30 to 80% AMI. I will say a significant amount is closer to the lower range of that AMI. And not only will it serve high priority homeless individuals, but persons with disabilities and families with children will be able to live in this particular development. And the unit sizes range from efficiency to 3 bedrooms. And this project does include MPHA vouchers, or Minneapolis Public Housing Authority vouchers. And we're recommending Curie for $1.25 million.
Excuse me.
Oh,
Excuse
yeah.
me, Ashley. Councilmember Chambliss has a her hand up.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Sorry, I
yeah.
missed it. Councilmember Chambliss.
Oh, that's okay. I was just curious. I think in the community development meeting, there was a target for the different levels of affordable AMI in terms of, these projects. Usually they have a target of, a minimum of 30% or a set number of units at the, like, for example, 30% AMI. Do we have those numbers for these?
Yeah, so each project has an average affordability number that we calculate when we consider scoring or comparing across projects. So in general, LHAA, the threshold criteria is that the project as a whole serves at or below under 60 AMI. But in averaging the affordability across the number of units and the AMIs that connect with those units, there is an average affordability kind of score, if you will, and that is one of the criteria that we actually consider. So, of course, it's number of units at or below 30% AMI, but it's also considering all of the unit types at all of the levels of affordability. How affordable is this project in general? So yes, we do have that, and we do consider that in addition to if it's meeting the affordable housing need.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that threshold based on the number of units or the award number?
So you mean the threshold for?
Well, for example, they could say that for 187 units, that two units would be targeted at 30% AMI, for example.
Yep.
How do we know how much is reserved for the different AMI levels, like 30%, 50%, 60% plus?
Yeah, so all of that is included in their workbook or their performa that they submit when they're applying. So Curie's AMI breakdown, specifically, for example, is 18 units at 30, 35 at 50, 124 at or below 60. And then they have 10 at that at or below 80. So we know for every project when they first apply those numbers, and we average those numbers to get a full, and Minnesota Housing does the same thing, to get a full picture of, okay, how affordable is this project? So yep, they submit it at the beginning, and that's something that we look at, are the units leaning more toward the lower AMI or the higher?
Okay, I think that's an important point to bring out for the committee members. So, and it might be useful for the council members as well when it goes to the council.
Ashley, this is Casey Javichinsky at Wellington Management.
Oh,
Could I just, hi everyone, council members, just a quick clarification for our project. So this is in the Harrison neighborhood of North Minneapolis, and we actually have 40 units that are funded with MPHA vouchers. So those will all be restricted to families at or below 30%. And then we also have 5 units that are targeted specifically for long-term homeless. So there are actually a total of 45 units are at or below the 30% level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chambliss, anything further?
No, that's good.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Casey, for being here to provide additional information. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Chambliss. And also for the committee, the project summaries at the end of the business item includes the breakdown of each of these projects and their affordability. So the unit counts and how many units are affordable at which AMI. So feel free to refer to that and ask me any questions at all on the particular projects. And thanks, Casey, again for chiming in. So we're recommending Curie for $1.25 million, and that's in the city of Minneapolis. So next slide, please. So this is Rogers. It is a senior housing project. It's a 40-unit project, new construction in Rogers, Minnesota. Their units are affordable at or below 30 to 50% AMI, and it's for seniors 55 and older. And this is a permanent supportive housing project. So there are services available to the seniors on site. And this particular development includes a senior sitter, and the bedroom breakdown is efficiency to 2 bedrooms. And we're recommending Rogers for an award of $1.5 million. Next slide, please. This is Cornelia View Apartments in Edina, and this is a partially funded project. So we were not able to fully fund all of our projects this year because there were so many requests. And in comparison to other years, and Minnesota Housing staff also shared this, there were larger award amounts and a real big effort to make the projects that were requesting funding whole any way possible. So this project in Edina is new construction, all affordable project, 118 units, and it is affordable at or below 30 to 60 AMI. And this project is for seniors. I will note that Cornelia View staff, Stephanie, is on the call, I believe, and she recently gave us an update about a change to her AMI levels. They don't change the overall affordability of the project. However, the range does change from 30 to 80% AMI. So that is something to note in the business item and in the presentation. So this project is also for seniors 55 and older, similarly to our Rogers project that is also a seniors project. And this project serves high priority homeless individuals and provides permanent supportive housing. And these units are 1 to 2 bedroom units. So we're recommending funding for Cornelia and Edina for $712,000, $712,714. So I think there's also, okay, so next slide, please. And this is okay, so that wraps up, Cornelia wraps up our multifamily recommendations. We're now moving into our single family recommendations. And the first project is Minnetonka Boulevard redevelopment in St. Louis Park. So this is a homeownership project. It's new construction, 8 units in 4 twin homes. I didn't know what a twin home was until I saw this proposal. It's a really cool construction where, similar to a duplex, they share a wall, and it's 2 homes that mirror each other, but they are on 2 different parcels and technically have 2 different owners. So this was a very interesting development, all affordable at or below 80% of AMI in St. Louis Park. And these are 3 to 4 bedroom ownership units. And we're recommending this project for $257,904. Next slide, please. So this project is Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. Twin Cities Habitat was one of the projects that applied to LHI only in the super RFP process for this particular project. And this is a scattered site homeownership project in Dakota County. This is acquisition and rehabilitation. So actually purchasing homes within the county and that were previously rental homes. So this project was very unique in that the county and Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity are working together on rental homes that were in the county's role and saying, hey, can we turn these into home ownership opportunities? So they applied to us for 10 homes for AC and rehab, and these homes will be affordable at or below 80% of AMI, and they're all 3 bedroom homes that they're proposing to build in the cities listed below. So this is a unique project. We're recommending it for $500,000. Next slide, please. Our second to last ownership project is Homes Within Reach in suburban Hennepin County. We often, almost every year, recommend funding for Homes Within Reach. Our recommended award for this year is $180,000. It's a home ownership project for purchasing homes, rehab, and reselling them. So this is a land trust proposal for 12 single-family homes, affordable at or below 80% AMI, and they're proposing to build 5-bedroom homes. Next slide, please. Our last single-family proposal is Own Street Home in Washington County, and this is another scattered site community land trust home proposal in the cities of Forest Lake, Hugo, Oakdale, Cottage Grove, St. Louis Park, or St. Paul Park, sorry. And these homes will be 3-bedroom homes, affordable at or below 80% AMI, but they are targeting 50 to 70% AMI. So I think that wraps up the single family and the multifamily proposals. I did want to note, and I passed the particular slide, for our first multifamily project, Minnesota Public Housing Authority Family Housing and Expansion, we had an error in our business item that said that the local match will be provided by the city of St. Paul. However, that is an error. The city of Minneapolis will be providing that local match. So I wanted to note that for MPHA, that particular project, that is an error. That's a typo in the business item before I moved on to talk about LHA anticipated outcomes as a whole. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of our awards this year, what the units break down to, and leverage amounts. And it's compared to the total LHA awards to date. So this is a slide that we come to the committee every year with to kind of get an overview of the anticipated outcomes of these grant funds. So on the left, we have the amount for 2021, which is $8 million. Which is estimated to leverage 88 million in public investment and 112 million in private investment, or 88 million in private and 113 in public. And how we measure this is we look at the workbooks of the projects, and we see the other funding that is coming into these projects. The public can include funds from Minnesota Housing. It can include other funds from the state, tax credit dollars, and the private investment leverage can include things such as donations, the project sponsor or their own funds, or any type of private investment that went into the project to support it. So we are proposing this year to build 557 new affordable housing units, and 549 of them are rental, and 8 of them are ownership. So moving on to the preserved or the rehabbed housing units. So you see this kind of breakdown of 113 for preservation, and that's 88 rental and 25 ownership. I think that is all I wanted to point out for this slide. So next slide, please. So I want to reiterate that it was a joy to review these projects and to work in partnership with Minnesota Housing staff this year. I will say that this year there were a lot more applications, and like I stated previously, the funding amounts and the funding requests were deep. So I would say in summary that our recommendation for 2021 is that the Met Council award these projects and authorize our Community Development Director, that's not on the call today, but Lisa, to execute these grant agreements on behalf of the council. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm open to answer any questions. And I believe Terry's here, and the city staff and development authority staff and development teams are on the call as well to answer any questions that I may not be able to.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your report, for your work on this, and to the whole team as well. This was great to see, very informative, and I want to thank our partners as well who are attending today for your work and for your partnership. Yeah, it's always a good day to give these awards. Committee members, any questions on Ms. Johnson's report? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your presentation. It's great. I'm curious about the single-family ownership homes. Is there a provision somewhere along the line in there to keep these affordable on resale?
Yes, through the
Great question.
chair, Councilmember Vento. Yes, so all of these projects have some mechanism to keep them affordable. The land trust homes, of course, have that land trust model. That was Councilmember Cummings. I was staring at Councilmember Vento like, I'm sorry, Councilmember Cummings.
That's okay. She wonders too.
Right. It all kind of blurs together on the screen.
Actually, if you want, this is Eden Spencer. I'm with the development partner in the city of St. Louis Park, Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation, but we are partnering with Homes Within Reach to ensure that those 8 units would also be part of their land trust program. Okay. So yes, they will be long-term affordable units.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Councilmember Cummings, anything else? Okay. Further discussion, questions, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, thanks again for the great detailed presentation, and sorry I missed the section of the project summaries that broke it down, whether or not it was preserving permanent housing or offering permanent housing or homelessness. I will be, watching to see what the trends are. I'm glad to hear that we got more applications and this is becoming more popular, and we're finding a way to work with mixed use housing to meet the needs of the homeless and folks that need more affordability, and still having the incentive for developers to participate. So keep up the good work, and hopefully, this will continue to catch on in throughout the region.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion or questions on Ms. Johnson's report? Further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Johnson has proposed the action that the Metropolitan Council awards 6 multifamily and 4 single-family local housing incentives account grants totaling $8 million, and that we authorize the Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on our behalf. Is there a motion to approve, please?
Vento moves approval.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Chambliss seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Even before I ask Michelle to call the roll, I just want to thank our partners that are here today and the ones that aren't for their great work throughout the region. Valued partnership for sure. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That motion carries. And we'll move on the agenda to our information items. We have 2 of them tonight. The first is the 2022 Livable Communities Act funding availability and scoring criteria discussion. Always an interesting topic. And it looks like Ms. Beard and Ms. Klemick, or Mr. Klemick, are here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, we've had later than usual funding recommendations for both the LCDA and LCDA TOD and LHI programs this year, but it's kind of neat. I feel like it kind of is really good context when we have discussions like this about how much funding to make available and what scoring criteria to look at for the upcoming round of LCA projects. So that is what we're here to discuss today. Next slide, please, Greg. And today's discussion will include a brief overview of the timeline. We've been visiting you a lot to talk about this fund distribution plan for the suite of LCA programs in 2022 over the past few months. And then we'll talk about funding availability considerations as we decide how much we want to program for these accounts. And then I'll share some of staff's recommendations about how much of that funding to program toward those accounts. And it didn't make it onto this slide, but we'll also include a couple slides at the end where Stephen Klimek will discuss some of the TOD eligibility criteria that we want to make sure everybody's comfortable with before coming before you, looking for approval of the final FDP that we'll be presenting at the next scheduled CDC meeting on February 22nd. Finally, I will have a slide where we can take a moment to just circle back on any of the program and scoring criteria we brought up at our last discussion, given it was cut a small bit short. If there are any remaining comments or questions that folks would like to address before the final recommendations are brought before you, we'll have time for that as well. Next slide, please, Greg. So as promised, here is the timeline. We really do like to visit you all with a lot of information and, you know, the kind of spirit of continuous improvement and constant evaluation that has really become the culture of LCA over the last couple of years is really shown here with all the discussions we've had with you over the last few months. And as you see, as I just mentioned, we'll be coming to your next scheduled meeting to ask for to recommend approval of the final fund distribution plan for 2022, and then that would go on to the full council on March 2nd, 2022. Next slide, please, Greg. So as we focus in on the funding availability considerations for all of the LCA programs, it's important to start with what the base revenues are in statute that are the starting point for how much we can make available in any given year for these programs. So for 2022, that means that TBRA, like every year, it has a base revenue of $5 million, which comes from fiscal disparities to put towards the tax-based revitalization account programs that address contamination and brownfield redevelopment. For the LCDA and its partner program, LCDA for Transit-Oriented Development, that is described in statute as a tax capacity-based calculation that is estimated to be about $13 million in 2022. For context, that amount was $12.6 million in 2021. So we usually do see a slight increase in what's available each year that is commensurate to increases in tax capacity over the year. And then for LHIA, statute gives us a base amount of $1.5 million, some from the council's general levy and some from the LCDA account. So these are the base revenues that are kind of the starting point for what we can make available in 2022. Next slide, please. So now we are looking at programmable reserves, and those are described as restricted or unrestricted. And what we mean generally by that are that sometimes we make grant awards that are not fully spent or are relinquished altogether before the project is able to break ground. When we receive relinquishment of funds, we put that money back into the restricted reserves programmable to the program it was originally intended for. So if a TBRA program or a TBRA award is relinquished, that would become a restricted reserve available only for programming in the TBRA program. Unrestricted reserves represent interest earnings that come from the share of council, funds that are sitting in council accounts, some of which are collected for LCA purposes, but obviously don't go out the door right away, so have some capacity to collect interest. And those unrestricted reserves are more broadly applicable and can be programmed toward any of the LCA programs. And so these amounts you see here show us what is available in those restricted and unrestricted reserve categories. And as you'll note, LHIA has 0 in restricted reserves. Not only is that always many, many times oversubscribed, that's also a program where, to my knowledge, I can't think of any times the money's been relinquished, which is just a reflection on how great the need and demand is for affordable housing projects. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go over account by account, the base amount, the restricted or unrestricted reserves available and what the staff recommendation is for programming those reserves. And to do that, we take into account what the last few years especially have been in terms of subscription. Have we been generally oversubscribed, undersubscribed, or had kind of a healthy, just slightly oversubscribed that allows us to kind of competitively review applications? We're also looking at all of the programs underneath the TBRA umbrella. So that's regular TBRA, which includes site investigation and cleanup, and the Seeding Equitable Environmental Development Program, or SEED program, which is geographically restricted and does not require an identified redevelopment project. So of that base funding of $5 million, we are recommending that all of that get programmed to TBRA, but that $500,000 of the $1 million available in restricted reserves be programmed to fund the SEED program. And that is comparable to what was made available last year. $500,000 was made available for SEED last year as well. And then $5 million would be available for TBRA in 2 cycles of $2.5 million, and up to 125 of each of those cycles would be for site investigation, and we reserve the rest for cleanup projects only. Any questions on our recommendations for TBRA before we move on?
Committee members, questions? Any questions?
And there will be a summary
Hearing none.
slide, so this is not
Right.
the only chance.
Thank you.
I was just
Hearing no
curious,
question.
Mr.
Councilmember
Chair,
Lindstrom. Yep.
was all of that 500,000 used last year for seed?
Mr. Chair, and I believe that was Councilmember Lindstrom.
Correct.
Thank you for the question. It was not. We are continuously looking at the SEED program and how to increase interest in the program. If you were able to join us at our conversation in January with the committee, you know that we are expanding SEED eligible areas and hoping that one of the intended consequences of that means we get more applications. However, we are almost always slightly overprescribed, if not more, for TBRA, and so we were able to program those dollars into cleanup funds through the regular TBRA program. And so we would word the fund distribution plan that we ask y'all to recommend approval for in such a way that we could still program those dollars towards regular TBRA if there weren't sufficient SEED applications.
Thank you. Ms. Beard, continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please, Greg. All right, for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account, which includes LCDA and LCDA Transit-Oriented Development, as I mentioned, we have a base funding allocation for 2022 of approximately $13 million, and spreading that across the LCDA development program, which is offered once a year, the LCDA TOD development program, which is offered once a year, and the LCDA and LCDA TOD pre-development programs, which this year, as you know, will be combining into one pre-development program offered twice a year. You see the amounts there of $7 million, $4 million, and $2 million respectively. Out of the $6 million available in restricted reserves, we are recommending an additional $2 million for the LCDA development program, an additional $1 million for TOD, and no additional funds for pre-development. And this is a little bit more than we had available last year. This is the same amount we made available for pre-development last year, but it's a little bit more for LCDA TOD. If you recall, during the funding recommendations last month, we had a banner year of interest in TOD, so we're somewhat responding to that we had a lot of really good projects and we're more oversubscribed than usual. And the LCDA development amount is comparable to last year as well. But that was also a program that was very oversubscribed. So we're always kind of trying to balance not exhausting the programmable reserves and maintaining some sort of a buffer, but also listening to kind of the interest in the oversubscription and trying to make as much available as we can when we know people have good projects. Those pre-development funds, just kind of getting ahead of a similar question that might be out there as Councilmember Lindstrom had, were not fully utilized last year. And like the SEED program in TBRA, we can program those funds into the development rounds, which occur after the pre-development rounds. But again, we are proposing an expansion of our policy pre-development program. And last year was the first year we made that much available and have been working to build more interest in the pre-development program. So we are hopeful that we will be able to see more interest, but again, can program any leftovers into the development rounds. Any questions on LCDA or LCDA TOD so far?
Questions, committee members? Any questions? No, hearing none, Ms. Beard, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I lost my screen. Greg, if you could get the presentation back up and we're ready for the next slide. Thank you. All right, last but not least, we have the LHIA program, which you're very familiar with, as you just saw the 2021 recommendations. And as you recall, the base revenues for LHIA are only $1.5 million, same amount that was originally allocated back in 1995 when LCA was created. So presumably over 25 years, you can imagine we can do a lot less than that. And the council has been remarkable at supplementing those funds with additional resources so that we could fund as many affordable housing projects as possible. But we don't have unrestricted reserves, that are limitless. And so recognizing that, we can't expect 5 million available in unrestricted reserves every year and trying to make sure we do retain that buffer, staff is recommending $2 million to add to the LHIA program. And that is $500,000 less than we recommended last year. Last year, we made a total of $4 million available for LHIA, and the additional $1 million came from an equity initiative through the council, through the full council. So while this looks drastically less than the $8 million Ash just shared with you, our funding recommendations for the $3.5 million, it's actually only $500,000 less than what we recommended for funding last year. We were just fortunate enough to get an additional $4 million through the equity initiatives funding last year. However, as you are all aware, we are proposing a pilot program for affordable home ownership through LHIA this year. And we are going to be talking to the management committee this week on Wednesday about a request for special initiatives funding to fund the pilot so that we can see how the pilot goes and if it's successful without impacting how much we can make available through regular LHIA. And so this table assumes that we will get $1 to $2 million from the special initiatives funding available through the full council, and therefore would put $3.5 million toward the regular LHIA program that goes through the consolidated RFP as Ashley just shared. And if you could go to the next slide, Greg. We also show if special initiative funding is not used, what we would recommend, and that would mean splitting the $2 million from unrestricted reserves we're recommending to program between the regular LHIA program and the affordable homeownership pilot. So if you think about, for example, the funding recommendations Ash just shared, a little over $1 million of those funds were for single family projects. In a lot of ways, the pilot would sort of serve as a place to program those, that share of the LHIA funding. So we have sort of a plan A and a plan B based on the council's willingness to support the pilot with special initiatives funding. But both plans call for programming $2 million of unrestricted reserves toward LHIA generally as the staff recommendation. Any questions on LHIA before we move on?
Questions, committee members? Any questions for Ms. Beard? Hearing none, Ms. Beard, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please, Greg. So this is our summary table of all of the LCA accounts, the 3 accounts, and then the base amounts, the amount of restricted or unrestricted reserves programming we're recommending, the total that creates for each account, and then how that would be spread across the programs within each account. So I'll just leave this here and let you all review the summary table and kind of ask again if there are any questions, comments, discussion folks want to have about the staff recommendations for funding availability.
Thank you, Ms. Beard. Committee members can see the summary of all the LCA programs. Any questions, comments, discussion on what Ms. Beard is presenting today? Yeah, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation and highlighting the base funding that hasn't increased since the 90s. Boy, we got to do better. I'm sure we're lobbying as an organization to get more base funding, and it's great that the council is and other agencies are pitching in to fill the gaps for housing. But this definitely demonstrates the need for more support for affordable housing. So thanks for bringing that out.
Agree. Thanks, council member. Further discussion on the summary or anything that was presented today? Further discussion. I think the fact that there's not more discussion or questions now, Ms. Beard, is just testament to the fact that you and your team have been engaging us throughout this conversation in a very meaningful way. And that's appreciated. If there's no further questions at this point, Ms. Beard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's very gracious. If you could put the presentation back up, Greg, and go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Stephen, who will share a few changes in TOD eligible areas so that y'all can be familiar with that again before asking for final approval next committee meeting.
Thank you, Tara. Mr. Chair, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Klimek, Program Officer for the LCDA TOD program. And while all LCA participating communities can submit funding requests to LHIA, TBRA, and the LCDA programs, the TOD program is additionally limited by the status of the region's transit system. And so as the region's transit system grows, so too does our TOD program. Our TOD eligible areas are based on current transit corridors level of service and planned transit projects stage of development. So as a result, for 2022, there are new TOD eligible areas for both the TOD development and the TOD pre-development program. For TOD development, the purple line, formerly the Rush line, which was eligible for our pre-development program in previous years, has reached planning milestones to now be eligible for the TOD development program. The purple line TOD eligible areas include LCA participating cities of St. Paul, Maplewood, Vadnais Heights, White Bear Township, and White Bear Lake. And on pre-development, as you know from this and previous info items, the pre-development program for TOD and LCDA will be merged and run together as one program this year. But projects in any TOD eligible areas will be evaluated with that context in mind. And so new corridors that will be considered as factors in pre-development evaluation include the B line and the E line. And these TOD areas cover parts of St. Paul, Minneapolis, Edina, and Richfield. Next slide, please, Greg. And then one last piece to TOD eligibility. Staff are recommending eligibility changes for parts of the Blue Line LRT extension. For the 2021 program, staff recommended maintaining the eligibility of the Blue Line's original alignment before many changes happened, while alternative routes were being developed. And so that process is still ongoing, but two clear alternative routes between Robbinsdale and Minneapolis have emerged that deviate from the original route, which you can see in the kind of yellow line on the map here. The majority of the alignment farther north between Robbinsdale through Crystal, Brooklyn Park is expected to remain relatively unchanged. And so as a result, staff is recommending that the council continue to maintain Blue Line LRT eligibility as of the 2020 alignment for this coming year's 2022 LCDA TOD program, with the exception of 4 station areas that are no longer part of the current alignment alternatives that are under consideration. And these 4 station areas are located in between the city of Minneapolis and the city of Golden Valley, and include the stations of Van White, Penn Avenue, Plymouth Avenue, and Golden Valley Road. The actual geographic coverage of our overall TOD eligible areas that would result from removing these 4 stations would actually be pretty minimal. The C line and the D line are in this same exact geography, and the eligibility of those station areas will maintain TOD eligibility for a majority of the geography that would have been covered by the 4 station areas to be removed. And this approach also maintains consistency between our LCDA TOD program and Hennepin County's TOD grant funding program, which we also maintained that consistency in last year's program, including the entire corridor for eligibility. They're planning to make these changes, and we think they're fair changes to make as well. I can pause here for questions, or I can hand it back to Tara. If anyone has TOD specific questions, happy to take them now or at the end as well.
Thank you, Mr. Klimek. Questions on the TOD portion, committee members? And I can't necessarily see all, so just please speak up. If I'm missing you. I'm sorry, Councilmember Chambliss, were you requesting the floor?
Yeah, I'm glad that we had this discussion about what happens when, a situation like this where the actual Blue Line extension route proposal shifts, and that there's still eligibility based on the ABRT TOD development opportunities. It'll be interesting to track the development along Olson Memorial Highway and Golden Valley route over time to see how that the development is happening over time for the ABRT routes. Because there may have been developers or community groups that were anticipating regular TOD development. And then when that shifts, obviously there's probably a little bit of lost opportunity there. And I know that the amount of development that happens for ABRT is not as high as, well, traditionally anyway, as light rail. So tracking that will be very interesting.
Agree. Thank you, Councilmember. Further questions or discussions on the TOD portion of the presentation? Hearing none, is that Ms. Beard, or are you
Thank you,
taking
Mr.
us?
Chair.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, if we could go to the next slide, Greg. As I mentioned at the beginning, I just wanted to provide a moment in case there were any remaining questions or concerns folks wanted to express. We definitely heard some feedback, especially how important kind of outreach and evaluation is of the more substantial changes we made to the scoring criteria last year, and we will definitely be embarking upon that. We already have embarked upon that, but we'll definitely be, providing some substantive evaluation for you all later this year. For the most part this year, we were looking at some tweaks and changes that came up through the scoring process and in conversations with, the Livable Communities Advisory Committee, with applicants, amongst scores that score for us internally, et cetera. So this slide has a quick summary of some of the bigger changes, updating some scoring criteria, language, and TBRA to match other programs when essentially they were capturing the same thing. Again, not changing any of the kind of scoring weights in TBRA, but just when like criteria across programs can be worded the same. We think that helps everybody, especially since some of these projects apply for more than one source of funding through LCA. Around equity scoring, we are recommending more emphasis on equity outcomes criteria versus equity process criteria. That includes adding a new environment and livability criterion for equity, and some tweaks to the minimum equity score that sort of adjust to the changes in the total points available for equity as well. We're also proposing an equity scoring kind of preamble to the criteria that provides more clarity on how we consider different types of equity in equity scoring. And then some other changes include making sure that preservation projects are not unintendedly being left behind in some of the scoring criteria, as historically we haven't funded preservation projects. To expand jobs criteria to more broadly include economic stability and opportunity. And to score identified financial sources for the project, but only to the extent that they indicate the feasibility of the project details, as we haven't found a correlation between committed funding sources and project completion. So those are the bigger of the relatively small tweaks compared to last year's scoring overhaul. But again, because we were cut short last session, I just wanted to take a quick moment to see if there was anything left that folks wanted to say or ask.
We appreciate it, Ms. Beard. Yeah, discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Could you expand a little bit more on the emphasis on outcomes on the equity scoring? You gave an example, but I didn't quite catch it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom, absolutely. So if you recall, all of our programs organize their scoring criteria against outcomes, and then against the process, the project process, and then the project team and their capacity and their makeup. And so the outcomes are really the scoring criteria that are tied most closely to the stated goals of LCA and the council policies in our regional development guide. And so last year we had, if you recall, 16 available points for equity in the first round of scoring. And applicants had to meet at least 10 of those points to be able to move on to step 2 scoring. But 10 of those 16 points were in the project process category and 6 were in the project outcomes category. And so we've done a little bit of kind of a, essentially what sort of a shift in the weight there, so that we are counting the potential equitable outcomes of a project. For example, an affordable unit, given the disparities in access to affordable housing across race, is an outcome we can expect that has some impact, or at least some potential impact in the equity realm. Process would be something more along the lines of equitable community engagement and providing, actual authentic agency to those most harmed by disparities and most affected by these projects. And while process is very important, that it follow equitable processes and that really thoughtful, intentional engagement happens. We wanted to make sure that we weren't considering process enough, that we were also saying the impact matters too. It's not enough to sort of reach out. These outcomes, as we look down the road 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or that we want to see some sort of tangible outcomes. So it was reweighting the scoring along those lines, if that helps, but feel free to ask a follow-up if I didn't quite get there.
You got there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Beard. Further questions or discussion on this slide or on anything that was presented this evening? Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I have my hand up, Councilmember.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Wolf, please.
I remain concerned about some of the wording for prioritizing racial equity over the other types of equity, because if a project serves everybody with low income or disability without discriminating against who might apply, I think it's important that we get those projects done rather than politicize the program. But the rest of the committee has pretty much agreed to disagree with me on that, so I know I'm not going to win, but I'm going to just point it out that I find it disturbing. Also, with some of the equity points, having the points be about city policies and stuff rather than the actual project, I don't know, gets us where we need to be, especially for a small community that maybe isn't doing a lot of contracting or something, saying, well, they don't have a DBE policy, so they don't get points for equity. A lot of smaller places buy local. And that may be a person of color's business or a veteran's business or a woman's business, but they're trying to support their local businesses. And so I don't know that getting in the weeds and saying they should have a DBE policy rather than buying local is productive as far as what the projects are that get funded, but that's part of our scoring criteria right now. Once again, probably agree to disagree, but I think we should be respectful of how cities want to do their purchases locally rather than prescribe that they need to do something the way the council does it or a bigger entity does it. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Appreciate it. Ms. Beard, did you want to respond or?
I am, thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf. I'm happy to respond. I didn't hear a question, so if there's a question you want me to answer, I'm happy to, Councilmember Wolf, but I appreciate your comments.
Thanks. And I didn't hear a question either. It was raising a concern. So appreciate it. Thank you. Further comments, questions on this report, committee members? Hearing none, thanks, Ms. Beard, Mr. Klimek, and to your whole team for this work, and we appreciate it being brought forward. Very interesting report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And, yeah, thank you. And then we will move on to our final information item For the evening, it's the 2022 Community Development Committee Work Plan, and it looks like Ms. Torres and Ms. Smith are here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, Lisa's out tonight. This would be normally something that she would present. So
Sure.
Angela and I are going to tag team on this item, and I'll talk about some of the Housing Authority items, and Angela will talk about some of the broader CD related planning type items.
Great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so next slide, Greg. So in terms of what we're looking at when we're developing our work planning process and developing our work planning for the year, you know, we look at a variety of things. We look at items that are required by federal regulation, state government statutory requirements, regulated requirements, and so on. We also look at the direction from Thrive MSP and follow the, you know, sort of the council will statements in that document as we're developing our work plan. And then we're also looking at additional council priorities as they come up in any given year and special projects related to that. You will recall that Stephanie and Lisa were before you in December sharing some of the accomplishments from 2021 in the Community Development Committee, and then also sort of carrying over some of those things into 2022 that were not completed in 2021. Today, Angela and I will provide really a high level broad overview of the committee and the division's work plan for 2021. And then Lisa will be back in late February to finalize that work plan with you all. Next slide, please. So in terms of, you know, diving a little deeper and organizing our work plan, we really have sort of 4 buckets that our work falls into. One is regular business. So this is the work that we do year after year. And our staff already have incorporated into their work plan and what they do as part of their regular ongoing work. We have special initiatives that we address each year. So these are new items for 2022 or items that we are responsible for on, you know, longer time cycles. So they don't fall into the sort of regular business bucket of work planning. We also have information and regular reports that we bring to you periodically throughout the year. So these are keeping you updated on the work that we're doing, items that we provide annual reports on, other informational item purposes to help provide context for either past or upcoming business items. And then we also invite you all to tell us what speakers you'd like to hear from or what panel presentations you would like to have that can set us up for future work plan items or discussions related to the committee's work or emerging issues that may be happening throughout the region. Today, our discussion really is going to focus on the 2022 initiatives. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you will see there's a lot of words, so I want to recognize that. But these are sort of part of our regular business as we plan for our work for the year. And all of these things you various managers and staff have talked to you about over the course of 2021 and recent CDC meetings. And if they haven't, you'll be hearing about these soon. But under the Livable Communities program, Tara and her team have been talking about the single family homeownership pilot for the local housing incentives account. It's exciting to see some of the first single family homeownership projects being funded this year for the first time with LHIA. So that will continue into 2022. For the local planning assistance group, we are so close. Like we got a report today, and Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, from one of the local planning assistance team members, but we have only 4 comprehensive plans left to go that have not been approved by council members. So that's a really exciting milestone in the LPA work. But
just one quick correction.
Yeah,
4 that
go
we
ahead.
haven't received. 4 that we haven't received, but we have 151 that are authorized. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I figured I was messing that up somehow. We're darn close at any rate. And
We're
so
very close.
yeah. But the next work, you know, step in their work is to then help and assist cities in implementing their plans. So they'll be reinvigorating the Planet series to help work with communities in implementing their plans in the coming months and throughout 2022. For the Housing Authority for Metro HRA, we've had on our work plan, you may recall, for the last several years, the exploration of a home ownership program. And we'd really like to get there this year. There are some real opportunities that we see that we have in this space. It's exciting to see LHIA moving into the homeownership space, and important for us to do the same. So this work plan item is really to explore what a homeownership program may look like for the Metro HRA. The second one is a residential preferences study. So this is a partnership with our colleagues in research to identify residential preferences of housing choice voucher program participants. So what are the trade-offs? How are the ways they choose where they want to use and live their voucher? And that will be in partnership also with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority and St. Paul Public Housing Authority. So we're excited to get that study underway. Coming before you in the coming weeks will be, and we've talked to you about this before, certainly at the housing work group a few times, but the Family Affordable Housing Program acquisition and disposition policy. So this is really sort of a rebalancing of the FOP, Family Affordable Housing Program for portfolio, to determine if there are some units that maybe no longer meet our needs. And so that will be coming before you in the coming weeks. I think it's the first meeting in March. And then the last one there that is really part of our regular business that received a lot of public attention last year is the discussion about whether and how to offer an award project-based vouchers for 2022. I have a slide on this. The next slide is particular to this, so I'll talk in more detail in a few seconds. In terms of regional parks, one of the initiatives is a historical cultural study. Thank you, Emmett, for my talking points on this. But that's really developing a baseline history of the regional park system, and aligning more with our regional parks implementing agencies and telling the broader story and history about how our system arrived and exists today. For the regional water trail classification, that's the exploration of expansion of the regional parks classification system to include regional water trail parks, to provide paddling opportunities, camping, etc. The third one there under the regional parks is eligible recreational activities and secondary activities. And this is where we ask ourselves the question of how do we continue to evolve the allowable recreation activities and facilities in our regional park system, while at the same time ensuring our system remains relevant to the region's residents and not losing the natural resources character that make our system so special today. And then the last parks item here is Park and Trail Master Plan Amendment Administrative Process. We've implemented something similar in LPA for comp plan amendments, but here would be the exploration of, should the council create an administrative approval process for routine and non-controversial parks and trails master plan amendment requests from the parks implementing agencies. And then under research, one of the big projects for them, amongst others in 2022, is the Community Profiles Project. And Joel, thank you again for the talking points on this, but this is about, so the existing community profiles are built on 2008 technology, which is now obsolete. And so it's really just a complete rebuilding of that system to improve the functionality and improve the information that's available through the community profiles. Next slide, please, Greg. And here's the project-based voucher. We've really been struggling as staff in terms of sort of the chicken and egg here, cart and horse over which things happen first. But right now is when we have the real-time information available to us to analyze whether or not the council should and will offer an award project-based vouchers in 2022. So I've scheduled a listening session for this Thursday, which is February 10th, with the owners and developers that have either in the past expressed interest in the PBV program or vouchers, that have reached out to me this year or that we have a history of working with. And in fact, we're doing broad publication of this to ensure that all owners and developers can come to a listening session, learn about the policy decisions that were made by you all last fall in terms of what we're considering when staff are considering whether or not to offer an award project-based vouchers. We also want to share with owners and developers some of these considerations about voucher turnover rates, about balancing project-based voucher waiting list admissions with admissions from the waiting list. And some of those considerations that we're thinking about. Then on Friday, February 11th, we'll be sharing what we've learned with the housing work group. So we're having that PBV discussion. So I'll share with them what I shared with the developers and owners, and then share some of the feedback we've heard. And then we're planning to come back to you on Tuesday, February 22nd with the PBV information item. And that will share the listening session information that we gathered, which is this upcoming Thursday. We want to share a year-end voucher utilization data with you and sort of our staff recommendation on how we move forward in terms of project-based vouchers in 2022. There's really been, we have a policy decision that is made by you all, but then we interpret that we also as staff have some administrative decision making to do based on what we hear in the analysis of data related to voucher utilization. And so it's been our interpretation and sort of confirmed last year during this whole PBV process is that you all as policymakers adopted the current policies in the administrative plan that outline what staff will look at when determining whether or not to offer project-based vouchers in a given year. And then we look at it as staff's administrative decision on how we implement that policy that's adopted by you all. And so that's our interpretation of that. And so we'll be back to you on February 22nd to share some additional information on that.
Ms. Smith, if I can just pause for a second, I appreciate the outreach that you and your team are doing to our stakeholders. Clearly, this was an important conversation amongst this committee and council members during the last cycle. So if we could, can I just pause here for a second, please, and see if committee members have any questions. We see the process laid out that we're going to be following this year, but any questions on this from committee members?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please. Councilmember Johnson, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Terry, for putting this information in our presentation tonight. It's really, really helpful. I know that this is a very difficult process to go through based on when you get the data and are working within the policy that we approved. And yet it's important that the council know that this is taking place. The members of this committee know this is taking place because of the heightened interest in this item last year and the continued interest and concerns going forward. So I appreciate this. I also appreciate learning today that this would be going to the housing work group. That is helpful as well. Would it be possible to get our policy that was adopted last year as part of our packet or prep for the discussion on Friday? I think that'd be nice because I'd just like to refresh my memory of what that policy spoke to that you guys then you are administering. That'd be really helpful for me. And then and then just one quick question too. From my understanding, you've got the listening session set. It's virtual. People can, I think, log in. Is there a way to collect information if somebody isn't able to join in that moment of time, that they could still submit some things to you that would fall within your process to get it back to us by the 22nd?
Councilmember Johnson and Mr. Chair, yes, we are going to be recording the session, and then it will be available for any developer that wants to view it after the fact. We also will encourage developers to share it with their colleagues. And if there are additional questions, certainly give them the avenue to express their thoughts back to us. And so I will share that out with during the meeting and then afterwards.
Mr. Chair, just one quick follow-up, and thank you. I really appreciate that. And again, I think the process is really good when the council members know what's coming and how it's working, so that we can also then better explain it to people when they reach out to us. And again, I'm hoping that we can see that policy just as we're considering everything in the decisions then that staff will be making. We can at least have that at the ready when we're talking about this on Friday. So appreciate this very much for being included in tonight's presentation and taking time to talk with me today, Terry. That was very helpful.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Further discussion on the project-based vouchers, Councilmember Vento, then Councilmember Chambliss. Councilmember Vento.
Thanks. Councilmember Johnson, asked the questions I was going to ask. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
More of the same. Thanks for asking the same questions that I had, Councilmember Johnson. And if you can provide council members with a link for the listening session, so that when it's recorded, if we can attend, we'll be able to take a look at that.
Thank you. Great idea, Councilmember. Further discussion on the project-based vouchers? Further discussion? Right. Hearing none, we'll move on to the 2022 initiatives. Please, Ms. Smith.
Actually,
thank
I'll
you.
take
Yes.
I'll take that, Chair Lilligren.
All right.
Greg, if you'll pull up the slide again. There you go.
Ms. Torres.
Thank you so much, Chair. 2022 initiatives that are going to be continued efforts from 2021 include the Regional Parks Visitor Study. So the Council conducts that study once every 5 years. It provides critical management insights for regional park and trail managers. It also produces key inputs that are used in the Regional Park and Trail Grant Program funding formulas. Obviously, thank you to Emmett for providing me with talking points on that one. The Metro Climate Stats provides GHG emissions data for our entire region. It includes a scenario planning tool to help communities choose their policy path to greenhouse gas emissions reductions. The Mobility Demonstration Program assists families with children in moving to low poverty areas of the region and to provide services to remove barriers to success. Moving to Work Authority is a federal designation that provides flexibility in how rent assistance programs are operated. System statements, actually one that I know about, are issued to local governments following changes to system plans. And in March, we plan to issue system statements that include proposed changes to the TPP and changes made in 2020 to the Regional Parks Policy Plan related to system additions. System statements advise local governments of changes and where needed, advise whether or not a plan amendment would be needed to reflect the most current system plan. Analysis of visitation to regional and state parks is a joint project among the Metropolitan Council, the Minnesota DNR, and the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. This partnership project seeks to create a shared statewide analysis of parks and trails visitation using location-based services data to generate parks and trails visitor information. And the Climate Action Plan will unify our climate planning efforts while committing us to new ones, both across CD and across the Council. It is a functions and services plan, focusing primarily on our operations and how we do our work at the Council. Next slide, please. So, CDC-related components of the Regional Development Guide is a lot of the work that we're going to be doing this next year. The planning and development of the 2050 Regional Development Guide starts with some foundational work, which is in full swing. This includes working with council members, external and internal partners across the region to explore the vision and values of the region. The first engagement will start in early March at the Committee of the Whole meeting. At our last meeting, you directed LUAC to work this year to evaluate community designations, which kicks off the land use policy development for the 2050 Regional Development Guide. In this planning cycle, we face some fundamental shifts to trends as a result of telework, climate change, etc., and we can't fully predict how those trends will play out in the future. So scenario planning is an approach to aid in planning for an uncertain future. That's coming out of the research work unit, along with regional demographic and employment forecast updates that are in process as well as part of that scenarios planning work. Tara helped me with this next one, although to be honest, I asked for one sentence and she gave me 4, so here you go. Staff has begun exploring what the barriers are to building more affordable housing at at or below 30% AMI. We know that we're producing barely more than 10% of the new units needed at that income level annually. We're researching the reasons for this, the impact of not producing enough of these units, and the benefits of increasing this production for everyone in the region. We plan to present our findings and recommendations for ourselves and our partners in late summer of 2022. The last Met Council report on manufactured home park preservation was provided in 2016, and this report will be updated this year. Division staff will also be working on other studies related to the regional parks and trails system, continuing to work with regional partners to implement the regional economic framework, and we expect that other studies may be identified as we engage our partners, both internal and external, around this work. Next slide, please, Greg. Today, we're seeking direction from the committee members on the proposed work plan with these questions in mind. Are there areas of policy that the committee would like to discuss and clarify? Is there any additional information or reports that the committee seeks in order to better inform its work? Are there any invited speaker or panel presentations that the committee is interested in to better inform its work? The committee's input will be incorporated as we prepare a work plan for adoption later in February when Lisa will return, as Terry mentioned. And this finalized work plan will also include a timeline for the different items in the plan. Terry and I are available for questions. In addition, Emmett, Tara, and Joel, who provided some of the talking points, thanks all around, are also in the audience if there are specific questions on one of their program areas.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Torres, for the presentation, for your work on this, Ms. Smith as well. And we appreciate the rest of the staff being here in case we have further questions. So the questions that staff is proposing is, are there areas of policy that the committee would like to discuss and clarify? Is there any additional information or reporting that the committee seeks in order to better inform its work, our work? And are there any invited speaker or panel presentations that the committee is interested to better inform our work? Committee members, your input, your responses to the questions. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for this summary of what's to come. I'm very interested in all of it, and especially the community profiles. I'm looking at a document from 2015 to 2017 that was presented last year. I don't know if that's the most updated one, but that's the one that I copied. And I'd like to see if we are looking at community-based assets and profiling that.
So, Mr. Chair, I
Thank
think
you.
I would like to turn it, ask Joel Hudding to come on. This is his project and he's the expert, so.
Great.
I'll
Mr.
take it
Hudding,
away.
thanks for being here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss. Yeah, so I think, you and I have definitely had those discussions in the past, and I would consider this year is going to be mostly scoping what's going to go into community profiles. I would guess toward the end of the year, we'll start actually building it. But that type of thing is the exact type of thing that we need to be talking about this year. So expect to hear from us as we really kind of get to the point where we're scoping that project. But that's what this year is about, is really scoping it out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudding. Councilmember Chambliss, I just have to ask you, did you vote today, or is that a sticker left over on your jacket from
Yes, I
November?
voted today. We had a special election in the city of Brooklyn Park, as one of the East District Council members actually got seated as a mayor, so that left an open seat.
Okay.
So tomorrow is the big day for the East District in Brooklyn Park.
Great, good to know. I read a little about that.
Which
in
is
the
where I
media,
live,
but
obviously.
yeah, cool, good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for voting. Further discussion on the work plan, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had brought up previously about reaching out to communities and finding out if the new scoring for the livable communities programs is something that they're comfortable with and want to be a part of. If it's getting good results. I know there was a lot of discussion before we did this, reaching out to like affordable housing developers to understand what are the barriers for them, what makes it difficult for them to produce affordable housing, and just making sure that, you know, we tried to simplify, but then we got a little more complicated on some other parts. And are we playing well with others or not on getting good development?
Thank you, council member. And I see that Ms. Beard turned her camera on, so I'm assuming she's the right person to go to for the response here. Ms. Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Wolf. Yes, it didn't make it to this particular list, but I assure you we have multiple survey focus group and conversations we are planning to have specifically with our LCA participants and the city staff and the city leaders that apply for and are awarded our funds to discuss the scoring. So we absolutely plan to do that and report back probably later in 2022. As we discuss scoring for 2023, we'll probably queue up the results of that outreach over the year.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Anything further? Great. Thank you for the thumbs up. Further discussion on the 2022 work plan. Further discussion. Of course, it's an ongoing conversation, or if there are things that come up outside of committee time, we can always share those with staff as well. Well, anything from committee members? Ms. Smith, anything from staff before we close?
No, just thank you for any comments you have. And if you have any after today, reach out to any, one of us, Angela or me or Lisa, and we're happy to think about it because this really does inform our work for
Right.
the year. And each of these work plan items takes staffing capacity. And so, as we're developing this, we're balancing what staff capacity we have. So we'll take whatever feedback you have.
Great. Thank you. Much appreciated. Well, we've reached the end of our agenda. Committee members, anything? Ms. Smith, Michelle, anything?
Yes, Chair Hilgren, I just want to remind committee members that our next meeting will be on Tuesday, February 22nd. Terry Smith's slide alluded to that, so that was great, due to President's Day. So
Great.
our next meeting will be on a Tuesday. Thank you.
I appreciate the reminder. Well, seeing no further business before this committee, thank you to all the staff. Thanks to committee members. We're adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.